I recently had the opportunity to play in a Pixelborn tournament hosted by Manticore of the Pop 1 podcast, and I thought I would give a report of how it went for me. The tournament had closed decklists, but it was possible to see what inks your opponent was playing before the start of the round. In round 1, I know I'm up against another Amber Steel deck. We start on the play and I'm able to mulligan into a turn 3 aerial with 2 lanterns. It's not the fastest or most ideal hand, but it's decently powerful, and the 2 lanterns make it so the first whole new world will be really in my favor. It also gives me the opportunity to play a 6-drop on turn 4 without shifting. Fast forward to my turn 3 and I play aerial as expected, and I find nothing and pass. My opponent has done not very much, which is good for me, and I'm able to play a turn 4 Rockstar Stitch the hard way. My opponent then shifts into a Rockstar Stitch of their own and sings Grab Your Sword. Now, I don't think this play for my opponent is very good, in part because if I had a Rapunzel here, I could really punish them. Unfortunately, I don't have the Rapunzel. Instead, I play Bodyguard Simba to draw, then quest and pass. My opponent takes out my Simba and plays Rapunzel to heal and draw, then passes back, after adding a hook to the board. Things are looking a bit rough for me, but I draw a Grab Your Sword on my turn. Now, I want to deal with their Rockstar Stitch, and I have a few ways to do so, so I sit here and think for a bit. I opt to empty my entire hand to remove their Stitch and put myself at the mercy of the top of my deck. Now, I do have a good advantage on board, but I'm going to need to draw pretty well at this point, I think, if I want to win this game, because my opponent has so many more cards than me. Now, luckily, any A Whole New Worlds in my opponent's hand are pretty much dead at this point because I have no cards and they have so many. Luckily, it turns out my opponent's hand is really bad, and after drawing a few Tinkerbells, I'm able to quest my way to victory a few turns later. It would be unreasonable for me to go through every single game I played, so I'm just going to try to give the highlights from here on out. Game 2 does not go my way. My opponent is able to build a wide board and quest all the way up to 13 before I'm able to find any sweepers to try to slow them down. They just spend 1 turn rebuilding, and from there it's not difficult for them to get to 20. In Game 3, I have a turn 3 aerial, followed by a turn 4 shift Rockstar. Now, I don't have a whole new world in my hand, but luckily I'm able to draw another aerial, which then finds me a whole new world. I wait 1 more turn to sing it so that I get first crack at the new cards. Just a few turns later, I've built an insurmountable lead on board, which quickly leads to a win. In round 2, we're paired against yet another Steel Wheel player, and on turn 1 they play a Lilo, and at this point I know I'm heavily favored in the matchup. The reality is that the aggressive decks that play cards like Lilo and Aladdin are just so much worse in the mirror that it's pretty easy to win. I take game 1 pretty quickly, but game 2 is much harder. Despite my advantage in the matchup, my opponent is actually able to pull way ahead in game 2. Unfortunately for them, they've drawn too many cards too aggressively in this game, and I'm actually able to win the game by milling them out with a whole new world. I play 2 wheels on the last turn before I would have lost, and it's able to seal the deal for me, and I win this match 2-0, and I go up 2-0 in the tournament. In round 3, we get paired against Amber Emerald Aggro, which tends to be a pretty good matchup for us. And in game 1, we have a really strong opening hand against an aggressive deck. Now, the problem is that having 2 Grab Your Sword in our hand ends up bogging us down and preventing us from transitioning to the mid-game easily. Their Genie prevents us from keeping our Stitch Rockstar in play, which also prevents us from singing our Grab Your Swords. They're then able to tempo us out of the first game. Game 2 goes much better for us. A turn 5 aerial singing Grab Your Sword plus a Tinkerbell completely wipes their board and helps us stabilize while they're only at 3 lore. From here, they're never able to catch up and we win pretty easily. Game 3 is really tricky. My opponent quickly finds themselves with multiple hard to deal with evasive threats in the mid game. I play an aerial which finds me a second grab your sword, but I'm unable to play 2 grab your swords this turn, so I can't wipe my opponent's entire board. My opponent then quests all the way up to 17 and plays a Hans that would be lethal on their next turn. On my turn, I sing the second grab your sword, but now I'm forced to sing a whole new world because I need to find an answer to this Hans that would otherwise win the game. I sing with Stitch, and luckily I'm able to find a Tinkerbell which is able to poke down the Hans for 1 damage. My opponent then plays a Genie, bouncing my Stitch Rockstar as well as a Lilo, putting lethal back on the board once again. Now on my turn, I'm in a tricky position. First of all, I need to find an answer to this Lilo just so I can stay alive for 1 more turn. But secondarily, I also need to make sure that I have a way to win on my next turn, because I don't think I'm going to get a 3rd one. I have to sing a whole new world looking for an answer, but before I do, I make sure that I put my 1-drop Stitch into play. I think my best chance at winning this game is going to be finding both an answer to Lilo and a Rockstar Stitch off this whole new world. Luckily, I find both. I sing a grab your sword, and then quest with my remaining characters, putting lethal on the board for next turn, although my opponent might not see it because it involves shifting a Rockstar onto my Stitch. My opponent plays a couple more threats and then quests with Genie. When they pass, I sneak the win in by shifting my Rockstar onto my Stitch. At this point, we're 3-0 in the tournament, and 1 more win in the next 2 rounds should lock us for the top 4. In round 4, we're paired against Ruby Amethyst Control, which is a little bit of an awkward matchup, especially because it's very play-draw dependent, and we're on the draw in this first game. It's very back and forth until about turn 7, where my opponent plays a Jafar and uses it to take down my Captain Hook. At this point, I start to think that maybe they don't have a Be Prepared in their hand, so I commit a few more threats to the board and pass to get aggressive. After they play Aladdin, I'm convinced that they don't have the Be Prepared. So on my turn, I play Tinkerbell and use my aerial to take out their Aladdin and wipe their board. At this point, my strategy is to play things to the board to force them to find a Be Prepared, and my hope is that I'll be able to end the game before they're able to find a second one after I refill the board. My opponent is able to buy some time by playing multiple Elsas and multiple Mauis, but they're never actually able to find a Be Prepared, and so I win this game. This is a really important win for us because it means we were able to break serve and win on the draw. That means if we end up going to a game 3, we'll get to be on the play and have an advantage. In game 2, we actually get reasonably close to winning, but the opponent plays multiple Elsas to catch up on lore. Then after they get to 18, they use Be Prepared and follow up with a big Aladdin. I have no way to answer this, so we go to game 3. In game 3, we're able to land a whole new world with a small board advantage, and after drawing our new hand, we play a Stitch Rockstar. After our opponent fails to Dragonfire our Stitch Rockstar, I'm feeling pretty good. Now that we've drawn multiple Surfer Stitches, the game plan is to never play a whole new world for the rest of the game if we don't have to. We should be able to keep up on cards while playing threats at the same time. I choose to sacrifice my Rockstar Stitch here, knowing that Jafar can attack into it because I just want to quest as much as possible before my opponent gets to Be Prepared. After playing the second Surfer Stitch, we're now way ahead on board presence and on cards in hand. The opponent is never able to find a Be Prepared, so we cruise to victory, although it's worth noting that even if they had, we would probably have been able to win this game anyway. We are now 4-0 in the tournament, which puts us in first place, and we're guaranteed to make the top 4 cut. The 5th Swiss round sees us paired against another Ruby Amethyst Control player, and it's an absolute slog of a match where we end up losing 1-2. I'm choosing to cut this match out because A, we're already locked for top 4 at this point, and B, the first round of the top 4 is actually a rematch with this opponent. We enter the top 4 as the number 2 seed, and we're going to be playing against Ruby Amethyst Control, the same opponent that I lost to in the 5th round. Unfortunately, the rules of this top 4 are that whoever goes first or second is determined randomly rather than being chosen by the higher seed. This is unfortunate for us because the matchup is very play-draw dependent, and we happen to be the higher seed. We lose the die roll and are forced to go second. We have a decent start with multiple early drops and multiple aerials with a lantern. We're also able to set up a good whole new world. Unfortunately, neither of our aerials is able to find us an ink, and we miss our 4th ink after drawing one too many grab your sword. Even still, this whole new world is going to be pretty good here, and we have a reasonable shot at still winning this game. After playing a whole new world, I choose to go wide by playing as many characters as I can to get as much lore as I can before my opponent plays Be Prepared. My game plan for post Be Prepared is to draw cards with this Surfer Stitch and hope that's good enough. I feel like I'm forced to play Beast into Be Prepared because if I don't, another Maui or Rafiki is enough to clear what I have on the board in just 2 turns. My opponent of course has the Be Prepared and it's back to square one and I only have 8 lore. I make an attempt at clawing my way back into this game, but my opponent has superior late game and it just never pans out for me. In game 2, I'm able to land a turn 4 Rockstar Stitch, which is really strong. I get a whole new world off in a position where my opponent has no way to remove the Rockstar Stitch on their turn. On my turn, we have an extremely powerful turn where we play a whole bunch of threats on my side of the board, all of which replace themselves thanks to Rockstar Stitch, and we're even able to wipe their board with a Grab Your Sword sung by Ariel. With Be Prepared 3 turns away, there's absolutely no way my opponent can get their way back into this game. They do eventually have the Be Prepared, but by that time I'm already at 19 lore, and it's almost impossible to stop me from getting the final one. On we go to the final game. On turn 4, I have the option between shifting into Big Tinkerbell or Big Stitch, and I choose to shift into Big Tinkerbell in hopes of drawing out a Dragonfire. This way I can land Big Stitch next turn. This play actually draws the Dragonfire exactly as hoped, and on my turn I shift into Big Stitch. Unfortunately for me, my opponent actually has a second Dragonfire, which puts me way behind. I play out my final Stitch Rockstar, but now I'm behind both on resources and on lore. It's not looking good for me. I sing a whole new world and then play some more threats. Unfortunately, my opponent is able to clear my Stitch Rockstar with the help of a Rafiki out of their hand. Just a little bit later, it's actually starting to look like we might have a shot to win this game, but we are behind on cards in hand. A Maleficent from my opponent evens out the board, and I feel like I'm forced to play every card I can in an attempt to push for the victory. My opponent then sings a Be Prepared, and now I'm left with absolutely no cards on board and no cards in hand. This game is now unwinnable for me. And we go out in the semifinals. Well, I had a ton of fun playing in this tournament, and I want to say thank you to Manticore for setting this up. I believe the plan is to maybe host more of these tournaments in the future, and if possible, I will put a link in the description down below where you can sign up for the next tournament. Thanks a ton for watching, and like and subscribe if you made it this far. Thank you.